So guys, how's it going? So I've got something I can show you real quick. If you are wanting to spend in this game, now's the time if you are a plume monarch, because you can get the righteous banana, which, if you didn't already know, is a super great pal to get in the entire game. I would argue that between like the octopus and the other pets, that is going to be one of the few pals that you definitely want to acquire if you have not already. That said, something else that I thought was worth mentioning. All right. So with the event, of course, hidden treasure, you can get your Arakar lock if you haven't already gotten it. You can get your, cool skins and whatnot. That was the big piece during the serve merge party. But one thing that people may have not noticed with the Shroomy Sports in particular, okay, if you do disc shooting, obviously you can get some this way, what have you, and then, of course, we have Extreme Race. The cool thing about Extreme Race, though, is you can get Holy Dragon and Eye of the Raven if you haven't already gotten the Eternal Flame. Now, again, I have talked a little bit about this, and again, it's a really cool, as far as the artifact is concerned. Is it going to be, like, overpowering, great? Debatable, right? But here's the thing, okay? The other two that you are looking at, that is to say, you have in the model department, okay? We have our buddy Opal Holy Dragon, which I can find right here. Okay, so Holy Dragon in particular, you get a stack of three stacks of guard every 11 seconds, which increases your defense, and you lose one stack every second, and then you'll deal 2,000% skill damage, 800% current combo damage, and 800% current counter damage at the end of the guard. And so basically, you get 3 hits of that amount of damage at the end of the guard, plus you lose some of your defense as you drop. So is it good? Yeah, it's a good overall, like, for most players, if you haven't already gotten Holy Dragon, you're going to find that's not a bad mount compared to a lot of the other mounts. However, one thing I will point out is, so, like, when you're comparing this now to, say, like, all right, in the Eye of the Raven option, right, where you cast an equipped active skill at random every 20 seconds, and it casts the first time 2 seconds after the battle starts. This is interesting because what it effectively does is certain builds and certain classes that say they need their active skill to trigger more often. Okay, so like, for example, let's say you're, running a class like a Plume Monarch, for example, right? All right, your active skill, when triggered twice, is going to deal 10,000 almost AoE damage, and then increases combo damage by targets within range by 60%, lasting for 8 seconds. And additionally, every enemy evasion for 10. Okay, so if I was to, say, trigger it, I'm going to basically gain 2 seconds of a lasting 8-second damage. That's going to be pretty noteworthy in and of its, for most people, that's going to be noteworthy, at least when you're looking at, say, a Plume Monarch. But let's say you look at the Martial Sage, for example, or the Martial Sage. All right, say he got it triggered. Continuously restore 15% of max HP for 5 seconds. It's just going to increase that little bit of time that you get for counter damage. Okay, still useful, but is it as good? If you look at Warbringer, okay, a little bit more counter damage that you can deal, plus you get to launch targets within the air when countering within 5 seconds. Okay, now that could be helpful, but again, debatable if whether that repeat's actually going to be as useful. But now if you look at, like, Piercing Boneforge, for example, where you basically get to prevent targets from regenerating energy, although 6 active skills for 4 seconds, that, however, could be very useful. Okay, so where, Piercing Boneforge being used once is going to do some damage, being able to go off twice, that could be pretty advantageous. And if you look at the Prophet, you can break enemy shields instantly with attacks for 10 seconds. Okay, suppose you get to do this twice. That's going to be kind of advantageous on its own, because you're also going to increase the stun duration by 30%. So if you hadn't stunned them in the first second, if you had stunned them a second time, now you just, you increase the likelihood that they're going to be doing that again. Plus, if you look at, like, Galaxy Dive, you can boost skill crit damage by 50% for 10 seconds. So having procced this again, you're again, getting kind of a little bit more out of it. So when you look at the Plume Monarch and you're going, okay, you're going to additionally ignore enemy evasion for 10 seconds. You're basically, if you were to wear the Eye of the Raven, you're just expanding the length of time that you don't have enemy evasion. Which is to say, builds that are already heavy in evasion, or builds that maybe don't focus on evasion, it's not really going to do you a lot of good, right? So for that reason, when I look at Eye of the Raven, I'm not super jumpy about it. Okay, but I just thought, hey, it'd be worth pointing out, because I think some people will probably wonder is the Eye of Raven better? Is the Holy Dragon better? Or should I just get another Eternal Flame? And if you ask me, between the three of these options, really, I think the only people that may pick up Eye of the Raven are going to be Sacred Hunter builds. You might see some people that are running Prophet that might grab it. But if anything, I think most people will probably want to pick up like Holy Dragon. If not, if they're already, going head over heels into the Eternal Flame for some reason. Now, the only thing about the Eternal Flame that's a little unique is the fact that, you're going to get a little invincible torchbearer who then gains, after he disappears, and mind you, it has to exist for 2 seconds. So 2 seconds into this fight, you have done absolutely nothing. But after that 2 seconds, then it increases your final crit damage and skill crit up 5%, and your 5% final crit on your pals. Okay, so you're gaining 5%. That's, all right. And then 8 seconds into it, you get another one that lasts for 2 seconds. So mind you, that'd basically be, at this point, 8, 9, 10. So mind you, okay, the battle's already gone off. In 2 seconds, you've already gotten a 5% increase to your crits, basically. With exception to one notable crit, which is combos, best pal and the friend, it's like, it's going to be kind of interesting. But, suppose that happens, you're still going to increase your attack speed and your pal attack speed by 5%. And then suppose you live 15 seconds, which is unlikely. Suppose that happens, then you're going to gain 5% after, so basically 17 seconds after this, you're going to gain 5% attack and 10% defense. Again, is that really going to happen? Probably not. It's only going to be really useful on like PvE bosses and stuff like that. So I don't see you'll find that the Invincible Torchbearer, for most people, PvP, it's probably not going to be a super jumpy piece. If anything, it'll be for people that are looking for those PvE builds that are trying to tweak things just ever so slightly and get that much more out of it. Then I think for most of your players of choice, between the Eye of the Raven and the Holy Dragon, I think it's really going to be a question of if you don't already have a decent mount, pick up the Holy Dragon. And if you're a Plume Monarch or you're a Prophet, I mean, it doesn't really matter. The Holy Dragon is, generally speaking, good just regardless of what class you are. I mean, it's just decent in the fact that it's basically using stacks of guard to basically flak the living bejeebus out of whoever you are already currently up against. So for that reason, it's pretty good. When you look at the Eye of the Raven, okay, as opposed to all the other artifacts that are available out there, okay, where here, like, you can do basic and combos, dealing another 30% AoE. If you get tier attack, for example, you get a Peppy that takes 20% of your max HP, and after its death, it deals 1,000% basic attack damage, which, again, not terrible, right? It's not by no means is that bad, right? 1,000% attack damage is great and grand, but in the grand scheme of things, is it the best possible piece there? Probably not, because, again, looking at like Eye of the Raven, where I'm getting to cast my active skillet twice, that's 10% damage there as opposed to 1,000% basic attack damage. It's just kind of and as far as like the Candy Gatling gun, for example, you take basic attacks, combos, and counters, and unleash an additional 1 to 5 bullets. Each bullet does 10% of current basic attack. Not all that grand. And you look at Skyward Blade, you're getting, for every 10 basic attack, combo, counter, skill, you release a sword aura that does 150% current basic attack. That's, again, it's speed based, so for that reason, it's not as good as a lot of the other options here. 11 seconds as given, 1,000% AoE, and then you get to confuse, and each of their own attacks, basic attacks, combos, counters, and will deal an extra 20% of their current basic attack damage to themselves. This is kind of interesting. Like, that one could potentially be better or worse depending on what type of class you are. Like, if you're a stun build, you just found a way to basically potentially screw up a counter build by using their own damage against them, you know. So for that reason, it's that one could be pretty good. If you look at like the Flaming Carnage, where every crit has a chance to deal an extra AoE bleed damage to 50% of your basic attack, ignoring damage immunity, reducing the target's crit resistance by 1% and stacking up to 20%. That is huge, okay? There are very few artifacts in the game that actually do anything to crit resistance, and so for that reason, you know, I don't know. I pay very close attention to the Flaming Carnage and what it has to offer for just about any build, really. But even with Plume Monarchs in particular, like, it'd be nice to have that. Each basic attack with 15% to apply stack of tier, you know, dealing 20% basic attack damage per second of the target and reducing their defense by 6%, up to 5 times after 5 stacks, dealing damage 8% of their max HP once, and increases their damage received by 6% until the battle ends. This is helpful. That's definitely a huge plus. Okay, that alone kind of puts it in the arena between the Flaming Carnage and the Web Chainsaw. Both of them are good. But what's going to ultimately determine whether this is the right piece for you is whether or not you are stacking stupid amounts of basic attack damage. Because you're only going to be dealing 20% of your basic attack damage per second to the target. You know, so you've got to have a pretty substantial amount of that in order to really make it work. And with this, it's you know, it's only taking your basic attack up to 50% as AoE bleed, but it's dropping crit resistance, which is huge. Now, if you look at like the Siren's Whisper, which we had not that long ago, you've got the Abyssal Beast with control immunity, 16% of your health, and it deals 40% damage. You know, okay, that's probably like one of the worst, but not the best. And so for that reason, you know, it's like, of all of these choices that you have at your disposal, you know, it's like there's not very many out here where you can just kind of pick and choose which demon you would rather have. But I would say if it were me, I'd rather have the Flaming Carnage, the Web Chainsaw, the Spring Cord, or the Eye of the Raven for what it has to offer compared to a lot of these other pieces. And that's, you know, looking at it from a perspective of a Plume Monarch, but even just in classes in general, like, that to me makes the most amount of sense. That said, though, again, we still have the Summer Carnival going on, so make sure you're doing that. And then obviously, like I said, you know, if you haven't already gotten Righteous Banana, now's a great time. If you want to save some money, make sure you check out this ending part of the video if you want to save some money along the way. And thank you guys for watching.